All right. Okay. And with that also, I am going to start sharing. Again, I can hear you. So if you need to unmute yourself to say something, I will not see the chat box for next 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation right now. I also have some simulations if we get into question answers and whatnot. Let's see. Show small active speaker window. Okay, so I'm just making my window as my speaker window. All right, right now I see Meghanaji into that window, but I'm not sure why. Do you see me? Anyone sees me as a speaker, like on the small window? Okay, perfect. Okay, very good. All right. Okay. So since your group is called Bhagavad Gita group, just for that I threw in there Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata, as everyone knows. Um, all right. Okay. There I see. So, okay. Good. Very good. Okay. So in general, just like say if we are studying Bhagavad Gita, we would need some background. If we want to know more about the Mahabharata, we anything, any subject, we would need some background. We assume that we know certain things. We cannot uh, start from the scratch like a first principle for every subject. And so here I have put this comes from, actually all the three words come from Bhagavad Gita, and of course Mahabharata, and also from Darshana system. Do you have what it takes? And if you have seen my recent video with Dr. Purushottam Rajamwale, you might have seen some of these slides, so I'm just using that. Okay, so I call this Shraddha and Buddhi matrix. And why I call this, since I give lectures, since I did my research and publish a few books, every time I go and the people will ask the question, and when I try to answer that, many times I'll find they struggle to comprehend. And it's not the technical aspect. It is not the technical aspect of Mahabharata. It is not the technical aspect of astronomy. Many times it's not even a technical aspect of logical reasoning. But many times, because of their preconceived notions, they are hanging on to something. So for example, um, I would give a presentation on something like, when did the Mahabharata war happen? And some person who is sitting there in the audience, and he or she is 110% convinced that Mahabharata is just a story, it's a myth, and it's just a story like a Harry Potter. Throughout that 30-40 minutes, he or she must be wondering, what is he talking when he says the dating of the Mahabharata? Okay, so sometimes that is why it helps to have this kind of background. So okay, so how do we use this? For example, Sanshay is good. Okay, but Sanshay can be extremely bad, extremely disaster, or it can be extremely productive. And if we look at our Indian narrative system, I call it ancient Indian narratives, all our Grantha Sampada, you will find that Sanshay is valued, and the bad aspect of Sanshay is also described. For example, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, when he says, Sanshayatma vinashyati, that Sanshay he is talking of a Sanshay of a mind. Whereas if you say go to Nyaya Darshana, the 16 elements of Nyaya Darshana, you will hear what is that? Prameya, Prayojana, Drishtanta, Siddhanta, Sanshaya, Avayava, Tarka. So that is that word Sanshaya is like a devil's advocate, or being cautious, like a savadhanata, in that sense. Like you should not take something at a face value, but you should keep your critical thinking faculty alive and be critical of it. Just don't take it blindly. That's Sanshaya is good, and that is a Sanshaya of a Buddhi. The other aspect is a Shraddha. Again, many people will think Shraddha, not here I'm saying, but in general, Shraddha like is some belief system, and Shraddha, Andhashraddha. Well, Shraddha is extremely powerful. In fact, nothing can be done without Shraddha. So for example, like we travel, most of us travel, and we sit on that aeroplane, and honestly, most of the time, and especially these days after 9/11, we never get to see the pilot for most part. We never get, before we could go to the cockpit, say hello on a long flight. It's no longer so. But we don't know who that person is. If he's truly trained, we trust the airline system. Okay, we trust that this pilot knows where he is going, or where he she is going, how they are going. That's also Shraddha. So Shraddha is not something very esoteric. It's very, very practical. And again, it has that range. So if I put the limits to this, so samshay goes from, say, samshay of a mind, manas, to samshay of a buddhi. So the buddhi is good. Manas is like where people say, I agree, I disagree, I'm not convinced. Instead, what people should be asking if they have a samshay of a buddhi is say, what is the evidence that you are using based on which you are making this statement, and so on. Now Shraddha also, I mean, if you all of you are studying Bhagavad Gita, and I don't know what format you study, but if you are going from the front, that's one thing. If you're going different aspects, so like 17th chapter, you go and you hear all dana, tapa, yajna, even our ahar, the food, it's also of three different kinds, right? Sattva, raja, tama. Similarly, that applies for a Shraddha. It goes from a whole sattva all the way to a tamas. So I'll just move fast forward through this. If we use these two elements, Shraddha and a Samshay, okay, I can create 4 quadrants here. And just to give you a quick feel, what is the great thing about Shraddha is that gives us the Karma Shakti. Think of even slightly beyond, going beyond, say, our Sanatan Dharma or Hindu Dharma. Even all ideologies, even right, all the Abrahamic religions, or even ideologies like communism, socialism, whatever, all isms. Uh, People will, if they have bought into it, they are so committed to it that they are willing to work for it. And that Shraddha brings a Karma Shakti. I'm not talking whether it's a good or bad, but it makes people do things. Okay, the things get done, activity happens, action happens. Now that's a Karma Shakti, but of course we also need a Jnana Shakti. The balance is important. And why is that? Just as a quick metaphor, you might have seen this system, that I think it's called K4 or something like that. So the accelerator, again, it's easy to show. The accelerator at the foot also will work just fine, but it's difficult to show that. So I selected this picture. So what this person is pressing is the accelerator that propels, that is that Karma Shakti. Think of that as a Karma Shakti. But you also need a steering wheel to keep the car on the road. And that's both are required. One is not sufficient. So that's why, therefore, we need the buddhi, the critical thinking, the samshaya aspect, and also the Karma Shakti. If one of the two are lacking, or both are lacking, then we have this challenge of a dependency. We have a challenge of dysfunctionality. And quickly, because today that is not the subject, how people would either behave or people would respond to any new information, especially a revolutionary information, can fall into something like this: fearful, confused, time waster. Okay. um, Typically a cognitive dissonance. That's what you will see if the person is only Shraddha is only not of a very high quality, and Samshay is only of a mind. If you are into the top left hand corner, the typical behavior is like a fearful, cocksure, directionless. The person confuses a claim, a data, or for truth. Like typically you will hear the language in a newspaper. We say, "Arey, somewhere मी कुठेतरी वाचलं असं, कोणतरी मला असं म्हणालं." Somebody said something like this. And or I get these questions all the time. People will say, but somebody said the so and so says this. What are your thoughts on it? And I say, I don't have any thoughts. The question I would ask is, whoever that person is, he says this based on what? Okay, so I'm going to, let me see. Yeah, I'm going to admit someone is joining it here. Okay, all right. And then the next one, bottom right hand corner. So the buddhi is there, okay, but not the Shraddha. So person can still gain knowledge, so to say, but because of that Shraddha aspect, lack of Shraddha or a tamasic Shraddha, now the person can come out as arrogant, brash, aimless. Like he may pretend the knowledge for the truth. Okay, knowledge is knowledge. I mean, even Wikipedia gives you knowledge, but just because it's on the Wikipedia doesn't mean it's the truth. Okay, and the desired approach is, of course, a fearless, humble, solution oriented, and that's validates and able to contextualize the data and knowledge. For example, if you when is it? I think it's maybe not 17. It's you help me. I think 16 or 14, somewhere there. 16th chapter, the Devi Sampatti and Asuri Sampatti, right? It says Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhir Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti, and it ends with Amanita, at the end. So this, if you look at those descriptions, it's a fearless, Abhayam, but also Amanita, which means humble. What is that fearlessness? The person is willing to, if the data takes you there, if the data says, okay, based on this, it appears like King Brihadrath was there of Ikshvaku dynasty 34,000 years ago. He says that's what the data says. If I find something else, I will change my opinion. Nothing wrong with that. And the person is humble in the sense that he or she can be wrong. Okay. And again, the approach is a solution oriented to solve the problem, not trying to know something for the sake of it. All right. So let's go to the next one. So I'm using those same two quadrants here. And so Samshaya here first. And sorry, just one second. Okay. And so same thing. So I'm not putting anything new. Then I'm saying that gives a Jnana Shakti. The second axis was of a Shraddha, that gives you that Karma Shakti. I'm putting one more axis here, that is the axis of a Jidnyasa. And why that is important? Again, I'm just in a way using this because this helps me address people saying why they need to ask a question of a certain kind, or why they just cannot throw the question at me and expect that now I'm going to work on that their question for next 10 years, you know. So jidnyasa, curiosity, and sometimes it comes in a different form. So it can be a kutuhal, just a curiosity. I want to know what happened to Abhimanyu, or what happened to Ashwatthama, and stuff like that. And that could be a reasonable question. But what is really expected is that it's not just a curiosity, but it's a prayojan, meaning if we get an answer to that question, because each of these, I mean, number of you are technocrats and doctors and whatnot, and you know, to find an answer to certain things, just like say to find a cure to the corona or whatever is going on right now, it takes time, it takes money, it takes resources. Okay, it's not something casual, because many times people will think, okay, this guy has a time and he will do it. And I'm sure people come for your expertise and just say, hey, you are a doctor, why don't you tell me this? Or you are an engineer, why don't you build me a bridge, and stuff like that. So the jidnyasa has to be prayojan. So if we find an answer to it, it should able to answer something, it should lead to a meaningful development in our knowledge. So that's the jidnyasa, and that I call it a ichha shakti. And these, as you'll see, these all come from Bhagavad Gita. For example, so these three aspects, if you go to Patanjali Yoga Sutra, what does he say for his thesis? Not necessarily for doing this. He says Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidan, and Tapasya. Okay, that's how you are going to get good into the Yoga Shastra. Okay, if you get to the Bhagavad Gita, so anyway, so if you are at the lower side of it, it's that vinasha, it's not going to be very useful, not very productive. Our goal is to go to the top right hand corner and so on. And I didn't know that yours was called Bhagavad Gita group, but I had pulled some Bhagavad Gita verses anyways, you know. So tadvidya pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, if we just take those three elements from there, so pariprashna, you know, that goes into sangshay. Instead of just accepting as is what somebody is saying, this is not asking a question, and you guys sent a lot of good questions. It is not asking a question for a heck of it, or just to put the person down, or just to see test that person, but because we truly want to know. Pariprashnena sevaya, pranipat, that is kind of respect, and then seva means actually that karma yoga, doing something, you know, that is also part of it, not just asking somebody and expecting that. Or if you have seen the Shraddhavan Labhate Jnanam, you will see this pair of three again. Okay, the Ajna, that is the lack of knowledge, and then Ashraddha, and also Samshayatma. That's what it comes. I'll go fast through this. So Savadanta, Shraddha, and also Sanyam. Okay, like this. So this is what I presented. So I thought I'll just use the same format. Now I'm going to get into Mahabharata right away. I'm going to use these three aspects of a Shraddha, what was that, Samshay and Jidnyasa, to quickly walk you through a summary of what I did on the Mahabharata, and then we will get into questions and answers. All right, so Shraddha. So where did it begin? My journey began, as Vinekarji said, I was in Alberta, University of Alberta, doing my master's, and I had finished my thesis. I mean, thesis was ready. In fact, it was a bit extended because I was working on my green card. I mean, waiting for a green card rather there, the Canadian green card. This was around 1995. And so what I did is, okay, so far I was doing all engineering. Of course, Bhagavad Gita I'm studying right from the childhood. My mother started me with Vinoba's Gitai, and then the school that I went through, I grew up in Konkan, Chipurun, Ratnagiri area, in a village actually, very small village, multiple different villages. And but the schools that I ended up going, especially high school, it demanded that I know Bhagavad Gita one chapter by heart. I mean, not just me, the whole student, the particular class. Every class has to remember one particular adhyay of Bhagavad Gita, and otherwise we cannot appear for the exam. So in those 3 years, 8, 9, 10, I had my 3 adhyay of Bhagavad Gita by heart. That was a good thing. So I had that background. So anyways, I had some time back to Canada, and so I went to the other library, the Rutherford Library, the humanities and other department. And I was just going through the Indian section, also some small Marathi section. I saw like a few books, like Venkatesh Margulkar's book translated in English and few others. So I was just enjoying reading that. Went to Bhandarkar Oriental's Mahabharata critical edition. And because of the connection of Bhagavad Gita, by the way, so I said, okay, let me see where exactly Bhagavad Gita shows up and what kind of variations are seen. So I pulled the Bhishma Nirvan, sorry, not Bhishma Nirvan, the Bhishma Parva, and it's a very thick book, as you know, Bhandarkar Orientals, and started reading it. And I didn't know exactly where to find Bhagavad Gita, but I know it will come at the beginning of the war. So I started with the first chapter, and lo and behold, to my surprise, as soon as I went to the second chapter, this is a dialogue between Vyasa and Dhritarashtra, and now Vyasa is telling all kinds of reasons why Dhritarashtra should try his best to stop the war. And as a part of it, he's saying, Vyasadeva is saying that there are so many signs I'm seeing. Nimitta is the word used, um, and it's not good. I see if you can stop the war. And that list of nimitta has all kinds of things, but it also has astronomy observations, okay, astronomy descriptions of what is happening. And one astronomy description that I found here in that page, so this is in the chapter 2, verse number 31, is now famous Arundhati Vasishta observation. So what is that Arundhati Vasishta observation? It comes in, as I said, second chapter, second adhyaya of Bhishma Parva, 31 verse. It says, Yachaisha Visruta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prushtata Kruta. Okay, quick translation just for our purposes, like the astronomy or dating purposes, that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Now, those of you who know astronomy, you will know exactly what I'm referring to. If not, that is when your Shraddha is required. I will tell you when you should doubt, okay? But I don't want you to doubt what I am saying when you should not doubt if you don't know astronomy. So if I say this is how it works in astronomy, it works. You can verify that. You can go to some other astronomer and confirm it. I don't want you to have a sangshay in a wrong place, okay? Now, what is the big deal about this observation? Well, uh, although it is a very prominent observation, only there are some more than 130 different Mahabharata researchers over, say, last 400 years or so have tried to, because it starts with Nilkanth Chaturdhar, okay, another Maharashtrian Brahmin staying in Kashi. And before Bhandarkar, we can give a credit to Nilkanth Chaturdhar. In a long time, there was no good collation of Mahabharata manuscripts. So in 17th century, I think, he was the 17th, 18th, maybe somewhere there. He was the first one in a recent time, last 500 or maybe last 1,000 years, somebody who said, let me just look at all the different versions of Mahabharata and make one qualified one. So he also tried to date Mahabharata. So it goes back to like 300, 400 years. But over these last those many years, there are, say, 130 plus different Mahabharata researchers who have tried to date Mahabharata, and more than likely they have come up with those many claims. Okay, sometimes the claims may match. Interestingly, only 4 out of those even refer to this particular reference. Okay, so that's very interesting. And I put that as a saying, they dare mention it. And the reason I say that is out of those 130, more than 50% plus, so let's say 60 or whatever that number is, 70 plus, they claim that they came to their claim of Mahabharata year based on astronomy evidence. Now, what is interesting is they say that, but they don't include this astronomy evidence. And the question is why? Now, of course, I did not know any of this. Now I'm telling you in retrospect. That time to me, just it was a verse. And because I knew little bit astronomy, I said, this is very interesting. I know who Arundhati is. I know who Vasishta is. And honestly, I thought, maybe you can say the engineering pride or whatever it was. I thought, Okay, I have free time right now. I will spend one weekend trying to figure this out and it will be done. Guess what? It took me 15 years, 1 5, from 1995 to 2009 to figure out what this one verse is saying, and in a empirical, in a scientific fashion to prove that. So therefore, I'm saying many other researchers, I was very curious when I finally figured it out, what others are doing. And that's when I found this. Only 4 even talk about it. Others don't even talk about it. And those 4 who talk about it, they mostly explain it away. For example, they said, this is astronomically impossible in the very order of nature. And who are these people? Just so that if you are studying Mahabharata also, then I will say the likes of Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya. If you know it, Lokmanya Tilak gave him that title, Bharatacharya, because of his great work on Mahabharata. Or the other person is Bharat Ratna Mahamahoopadhyay Panduranga Vaman Kane, who has written 5 volumes on the Dharma Shastra, history of Dharma Shastra. Now, these people were very much deep into Mahabharata, and both of them, for example, they said that this is impossible astronomically. It is not possible. So somebody might have inserted it afterwards, like an interpolation. The remaining one, for example, is Professor R.N. Iyengar. I mean, he's around in Bangalore, a great engineering professor. And he tried to do some jugaad. I will not go into that right now unless we get into question answer, but it doesn't answer the question. The fourth person, a number of you might have heard the name, especially if you're from Pune. But many times I find people from Pune don't know this wonderful person. He just passed away a couple of years ago, Dr. P.V. Vartak. He believed that this is a factual observation. He tried to test it in 3 different ways and did not succeed. Anyways, now some people, after I published my work, they said, well, Nilesh, but hold on, it's not fair to expect that they will know all this because the Mahabharata is so huge and they might have missed it. Well, that argument does not sell. Those people who did not use Arundhati Vasishtha observation. Why is that? Because in that chapter, the second chapter of Bhishma Parva, second Adhyay, there are 4 astronomy observations next to each other. And all the Mahabharata researchers who claim they use astronomy evidence, they use remaining 3, but not this. And this is not in some corner. This is right in the middle. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting thing. All right, quickly, I'm going to show you what that observation is. And this is going at the Shraddha piece. And I'll tell you what that Shraddha piece is. And I'm going to show you simulation. So bear with me. So this is Polaris. This is our pole star. And if we look at the relative position of Arundhati and Vasishtha, I'm talking of not human beings, I'm talking of the stars in the sky. In Western astronomy, modern astronomy, Arundhati is called Alcor, Vasishtha is called Mizar. These are this is the 7 Saptarshi that we call. So you see that as a pan, and then there are 3 handles. So there are 7 stars. In the handle, the middle star is that Vasishtha, and next to that is a small star that is Arundhati. Now remember, if you are facing the north direction at night here in the northern hemisphere, what will happen? The stars appear to come up, everything appear to come up in the northern direction from the northeast, so to say, will go up like anti-clockwise direction around the North Pole, and then they will set in the northwest. Okay, so that's what I'm showing. Just imagine that. You are looking in the north direction. So just to show you reference, I'm saying from the North Pole, I'm just drawing these 2 lines as a reference lines. There are no lines in the sky. North Pole is not moving. It is fixed there, and everything is going to appear going around it. So this is the situation now, today. Okay. So if we look at it, now, because we're not interactive and you will be in the mute, so I won't ask you that question, but I will tell you. So again, this you have to take it on a Shraddha. If you still have a samshay, we can do that in a question answer. So if the motion is anti-clockwise, which is to say, remember, it's going to go anti-clockwise, not the way clock is. So you will see that the Vasishtha is going to walk ahead. I mean, it will appear that Vasishtha is coming first, then Arundhati, and they're always like that. Vasishtha is always ahead, Arundhati is always behind as they go make a complete circle. That is the scenario today. This is how it will look like in a simulation, and I'll show you kind of a live simulation in a minute. Now, this scenario is there in our times, but that is how exactly it appears if you go back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. If you go, it's always that Vasishtha is ahead, Arundhati is behind. And now if you can see the Vyasa statement, now we can start seeing some fun. You must able to start see some fun. Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, it was Arundhati who was going ahead of Vasishtha. and not Vasishtha going ahead of Arundhati. So if we just put it together, and if you accept my other statement that in last 6,000 years Vasishtha is ahead, it immediately should tell you that if this Vyasa statement is correct, then the Mahabharata war did not happen in last 6,000 years. So that's the big deal about it. That's the big deal about it, even before we solve this problem. Okay, and that's what that jidnyasa, that's what that all those three forces should lead us to. Okay, now let's see what happens. There are two situations. Okay, I'm just giving you the answer right away. I'm giving you the answer. So there are, if as the Earth's pole, Earth's axis, that kind of moves like in a gyratory motion, and therefore it's pointing in a different direction at different point. It's a very slow motion of 26,000 years. So therefore, the point of North Pole also changes. So if you go back, say, to 4508 BC or 11,091 BC, the Earth was pointing somewhere in the different part of the sky. That is where it was pointing. But Vasishtha and Arundhati are exactly where they are still. So with respect to the relative position of Vasishtha and Arundhati with these pole points change because of that. And so what happens? If you would have gone to any of these 2 years, and you would have watched, if we were there and you would have watched in the sky, you would have found that Vasishtha and Arundhati, they are walking together in the sense no one ahead, no one behind. Okay, and when they cross the meridian, for example, they will cross exactly same time. That's what you will see 11,091 BC. That is exactly what you'll see also in 4508 BC, whenever those 2 years were. Okay, but that's still not Arundhati going ahead. But then a certain portion of the time comes between these 2 years, 1191 BC and 45 BC, magic happens. That is the whole entire time period of some 5,000, 6,000 years. Anytime during that point, if we were on the Earth and we were watching the northern direction, North Pole, and looking at Arundhati Vasishtha, we would have seen that Arundhati, not much difference, but Arundhati is walking ahead and Vasishtha is following behind. Again, remember, think of this, that is the center point of the clock now. We are drawing the lines to Arundhati, the second line to Vasishtha, and they are going to go in an anti-clockwise direction. So like this. And if you would have seen in the simulation, this is from Astronomy simulation software. So this is a meridian going from right to left, and what you'll find is Arundhati has already crossed the meridian, Vasishtha has not crossed the meridian. Okay, all right. So quickly, if that is true, what does that mean? That means if that statement is correct, then Mahabharata war only happened during this interval. Okay, so now bring this, put your scientific hat. That means AV observation instantaneously falsifies any claim for the Mahabharata war that falls after 45 BC or before 11,091 BC. This is a one good example of a Shabda Praman. In a Indian context, we talk about the Shabda, right? Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama Pramanani, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda Pramanani, like a Patanjali would say it, or sage Gautama would say it. In this case, this is a good example of a Shabda Praman. What Vyasa said is been validated by a Pratyaksha Praman, empirical proof using modern astronomy. I'm going to run a simulation here, okay, and hopefully you can see it. This is our time, 2100 CE, okay. Now that is that Saptarshi there. Now Vasishtha is ready to cross the meridian, and Arundhati crossed after it, if you just notice. So I had to slow it down. So what you saw, Vasishtha crosses, Vasishtha is always walking ahead, but it is very easy to see when it crosses the meridian, okay, because that's like removes the parallax and removes the other errors. It's going to go again and come again. So this is in our times. I'm showing it for a 2100 CE, but that is exactly the same thing in 2020, or it will be the same thing in 2021. Okay, so that's our Saptarshi here, the 4 stars, and then the 3 stars of the handle. The middle star is a Vasishtha, and next to that small star is Arundhati. So notice now, Vasishtha crosses the meridian first, and then Arundhati. Okay, so that's the situation in our times. Now I'm going to take you back to, by say 4,000 years. We are going to go back to 2000 BC. Just quickly notice that it is the same situation. Okay, again, it is the Vasishtha that is going to cross the meridian first. Now, meridian, remember, it's only a reference point. it is not the case that only at the meridian Vasishtha is ahead, okay? Because many people, when I go around and lecture it, they confuse. They think, why only meridian? No, it's all, Vasishtha is always ahead in 2000 BC. But it is easy to see as a reference line, just like, in a running race, when it comes to the end, they have to come in the straight line, and they push their chest in the further, and that decides who is first, something like that. So Vasishtha is ahead, Arundhati is behind. So we started with our time. We have gone back by 4,000 years already. Okay, it is the same scenario. All right. Then the next one I'm going to show you is 3000 BC. And I'm going to show you 3000 BC for a reason. Okay, so again, notice we are in 2000 BC. Again, Vasishtha is crossing right now, the meridian, and now Arundhati is crossing. Okay, so get used to that, because when we actually get to the year of Mahabharata war, they're so close that you have to get used to it. Now notice here again 3000 BC, same scenario, Vasishtha ahead, Arundhati behind. Now the reason I'm showing you 3000 BC is for a reason. Out of the 130 Mahabharata researchers that I told you about, and that everyone has come up with those many number of claims, we can easily say that 50% plus of them, they are around this 3000 BC. You might have actually heard these dates: 3136 BC, 3102 BC, 3067 BC, 3143 BC, 3126 BC, 3138 BC, 3172 BC. There are so many like that. And I just want to show you, for anyone who claims in that 3000 BC, they will not able to show the Arundhati Vasishtha observation to be valid, because Vyasa is saying Arundhati has to be ahead. Okay, so that's the importance of showing you something around 3000 BC. Okay, the next one I'm going to bit speed forward when it comes to 4000 BC. But just want to assure you that in 4000 BC also, it is Vasishtha who is ahead. Okay, so once this crosses, it's going to go to 4000 BC. And the beauty of social media is this. You see the name at the bottom left-hand corner there, Amaresh GS. Okay, we met on the Twitter, and not that long ago, possibly less than a month. I mean, we have not even talked to each other. He has read my work, he's convinced, and he's very good at this kind of stuff. And he did it for me. Okay, this particular simulation. Look again. Now this is getting close, but this is the Vasishtha which touches the meridian first, and then Arundhati. Okay, I'll show you again when it comes down. Again, if you can see it, that's great. If you don't see it, I would ask you to have that Shraddha and trust me that that is the case. Okay, you can work with somebody who knows astronomy. But look at first, it is the Vasishtha that's going to, the big star is going to touch the meridian, and then Arundhati. Okay, now in sky, these lines are not there, these circles are not there. Okay, so the astronomically speaking, we have to know how to make those measurements. The pink dot that you see, this NCP, this is where the pole point is in 4000 BC. Okay, and the year, this is where my arrow is, if you can see it, plus 2000. That is where our current pole star is. We call it Polaris or Dhruva Matsya. All right. So even in 4000 BC, going backwards, which is what, 6000 years ago, it's Vasishtha is ahead. Now I'm going to take you to a very specific year, 4636 BCE. Okay, compare that with the 4508 BC that I showed you. This is more refined measurement using modern latest astronomy data. What it is going to show you, just like it showed you right now, again, you will see it when it does it the other way. In this year, there is no one ahead, no one behind. Okay, Vasishtha and Arundhati, because they are exactly on the same line as the NCP, they cross the meridian exactly at the same time. No one ahead, no one behind. I want you to notice that. Okay, and therefore I kind of slow it down. I ask Amaresh to do that. I even don't know. I'm not technologically savvy. I don't know how to slow it down. I said, please, if there is a way, and of course he's very good, so he did that. Again, one more time, notice that they are coming together. And those of you who understand engineering geometry, you will know that. See, again, that chord of a circle, and the point of NCP and Vasishtha and Arundhati, they are exactly on that same dotted line. So they will cross exactly at the same point. Now this is the year of the Mahabharata war. Okay. Now, of course, I suddenly didn't jump to 5561 BC. I'll explain that. But watch what happens. You just saw it. Again, you will say it. When Arundhati Vasishtha are crossing the meridian, it's easy to see it there again. You will see that it's the Arundhati that crosses the meridian first and then Vasishtha. Okay, keep in mind Vasishtha is a bit bigger. So you may think, okay, they both are doing simultaneously. They're not. Just watch carefully. Okay, if they were just two dots, it is the Arundhati, the center of Arundhati touches the meridian first, the center of Vasishtha touches it later. Okay, now in fact, this was happening between that 4636 BCE all the way. I'm going to take you to 10,248 BC. Okay, so after 56, I'll show you the other limit. Notice those points here. When this dotted line cuts the circle, this point is 4636 BC, and this point is 10,248 BCE. So in those 2 years, if we were watching from the earth, Arundhati Vasishtha, we would have seen them going together, no one ahead, no one behind. So I have taken you now to 10,248, 12,000 years ago. All right, so that's what it will do. And then I'm going to stop after this. But the point is, now if you go beyond 10,248 BC, again Vasishtha comes ahead. Okay, so maybe actually I'll run the simulation and I'll show you that suppose you go to 14,000 BC, for example, anytime before 10,248 BC, again you will have Vasishtha ahead. And something beautiful, if you go back, say 10,000 years, 20,000, 30, 40, 50, 60, doesn't matter how far back you go, it was always Vasishtha who was ahead. Okay, so now again watch it, 10,248, they both are crossing together simultaneously, no one ahead, no one behind. And quickly, one more simulation. This is going back 14,000 years ago. And the only thing I want to show you is that, look again, Vasishtha is ahead. Vasishtha touches the meridian first and then Arundhati touches. So if you go back, it's always Vasishtha ahead. So only as far as our past is concerned, it was that time period of say 5,000, 6,000 years between that 10,248 and 4636 BCE, which is when the Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishtha. Okay, so let me stop that. Okay, quickly two more. Sanshay. So now what happened? So this is not how I came to 5561 BC. Okay, this told me that I should search for the Mahabharata war between those two dates, like 10,248 BC and 4636 BC, or somewhere in that range. Then I'm not going to show you today. If we get into question answer, we'll talk about it. To sharing will be a tough one in the sense, I will give you the link after this talk. I at Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit, I did a 5-day, actually I did 5-day workshop on Mahabharata. The first 2 days were for astronomy, and there are 7 lectures recorded, close to 11 hours of my blabbering. So if you are interested, I mean, I'll send you the link and you can watch it. Okay. But we can discuss that in a question answer. So I want to take you to the Sanshaya part and how Sanshaya can be useful. So I use the planetary data from the Mahabharata, and Mahabharata has some 35 plus different planetary descriptions, referring to our regular planets, their positions and whatnot. And that brought me to 5561 BCE. But once I did that, something interesting happened, when I was researching, and that was Bhishma Nirvan. And number of you also asked that question, so that's also relevant. Now, what is the status quo? The status quo or limbo that I inherited, and it began with Nilkanth Chaturdhar, the Maharashtrian Brahmin in Kashi that I told you, who started with refining of the Mahabharata text and finding all the text. If you ask any Mahabharata researcher, and actually one of the questions that somebody asked, and hopefully everyone has seen those questions and answers, it said, hey, I have heard 58 days or 6 months. Is it true? Actually, you will hear the common argument from all Mahabharata researchers, generally people, Mahabharata enthusiasts, that Bhishma fell down on the 10th day of the war. Everyone knows that. And he was waiting until the day of winter solstice. That also everyone knows. And the duration claimed is 58 days. Okay. And why 58 days? We'll get into question answer if we get there. But I want to tell you this, and right now you want to take that as a Shraddha, but you can have a Samshay afterwards. If anyone reads Mahabharata, you will realize that there is no basis for these 58 days. Absolutely not. Okay. In fact, doesn't matter who says this, doesn't matter how big that person is. It's not about individuals. That is extremely careless, casual claim from any Mahabharata researchers if it comes. Okay. And it's a extremely careless claim. And we'll talk about that in the question answer. What is interesting is, so they claim 58 days, but the year of Mahabharata war that they claim, for that particular year, they cannot show 58 days between the 10th day of the war they claim and the day of winter solstice. Nobody can do that. Okay, there are a couple exceptions, and if we have time, we'll go talk about it. But how do they justify this? They just try to explain it by twisting and torturing translations, evidence here and there, not talk about it, run away, and all that thing. Okay, the cause again I will tell you. Anyone who is convinced and stuck there is basically because they did not bother to read Mahabharata text. Mahabharata text has a very clear evidence. I sent you the link, the 4 links there, that very clearly shows how long Bhishma was on the bed of arrows. It gives a minimum duration, and I'm going to go fast through this because again, I discussed this in a 4 different, almost 40-hour long videos, and I have sent you the links. If you read Mahabharata, it will tell you that Bhishma was on the bed of arrows from the 10th day of the war until the day of winter solstice for at least, there is a minimum of 92 days. Forget 58. Okay. And as soon as you get this information, if you combine this simple information, 92 days, with astronomy knowledge, then something wonderful things come out. Again, another word from Bhagavad Gita. Yatadagre vishamiva pariname amrutopamam tatsukam satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. This is from the last chapter. The vishamiva part for me was just because of this Bhishma Nirvana, 58 days, which is a myth that is in circulation in the whole Mahabharata community around the world. I wasted 2 years. So if you want to call, that was my poison. Okay, I could have just gone fast if somebody had done the right work, but I wasted 2 years from 2009 to 2011 just getting that thing right. Okay, so I said the problem for my date was everything else was matching, but the Bhishma Nirvana 58 days was not matching, and I took it on a Shraddha. Why would people say something that is not true? I tried to see how I can fit it, and then finally I wrote it in my book, and that is still there. I deliberately kept it. I said, okay, my other work shows that it is 5561 BC, but somehow I cannot match 58 days. It doesn't, my date, my year doesn't match for Bhishma Nirvana. On the second thought, as a Sanshay, not to take somebody's word just as a true, you have to do your own investigation, do some tapasya. I said, let me just go read Mahabharata before I get to writing the book. And so I read this many times, just looking at any evidence that will help me, Bhishma Nirvana evidence. And that's when it showed me, actually it gave me initially 6 references, then 20 plus references, 60 plus references. And actually this whole adhyay and whole parva, they all show that it is more than 92. But something that beautiful finally eventually came out, that pariname amrutopamam is this. Now I can make, in a very scientific fashion, with a full conviction, I can make these 8 statements. Okay, I'll not read them. We can go back if we have to go back in a question answer. That if you come across any Mahabharata researcher and he cannot show more than 92 days between the 10th day of the war for his or her claim and until the winter solstice, you can assuredly take that that claim is wrong. Okay, if the Mahabharata war does not begin, I did not know this in 2011 when I published my first book. When did the Mahabharata war happen? Not all of these things. 92 I knew. But there is no other day when the Mahabharata war can begin. That is the kind of solid evidence exists in the Mahabharata text. It is not written as a one sentence. You have to, as a pratyaksha anumana, like the explanation prediction testing, the triangulation of explanation prediction testing that leads you to Kartika Amavasya as the first day of the war, Margashirsha as the lunar month of the war, then the timing of that as a Sharat season, the first half of Sharat season, and there are many other parameters, just like I showed you Arundhati, only one. But this Bhishma Nirvana will tell you that the Mahabharata war has to happen between these interval that you see number 5, 6, and 7. It cannot be outside. And therefore, I just add the number 8, I put that again Arundhati Vasishta observation. Quickly, last one, and we'll get into a discussion. And I want to make sure we have enough time to do that. So, Jidnyasa. Okay, after this, many people started asking me, so, hey, Arundhati, I buy it. Okay, the Bhishma Nirvana, great. Excellent. But that's only all astronomy so far, or just a chronology. Is there some evidence on the ground? Is there some, I mean, archaeology is a common bogey, but is there evidence on the ground? And of course, I was also equally curious. And so I would say this is, say, sometime after 2011, maybe 2014. And I started studying different disciplines of science in the context of Mahabharata dating. And again, we wouldn't have a time to do it. Sometime, any of this can turn it into a whole hour-long talk, or sometime it is you can take any of this subject with respect to Mahabharata and talk for 2 days. But just to give you a list of it, so I started with astronomy, and from the Mahabharata text I extracted close to 300, actually 300 plus specific astronomy description, and they all, when you solve like a jigsaw puzzle, like a crossword puzzle, take you to 5561 BCE. But then I started looking at different disciplines of science. So just to throw some names here, say oceanography, like Dwarka flooding, that has to do with the Dwarka flooding 5525 BC. Now, why 5525 BC? Because if my claim is that 5561 BC is when the Mahabharata war happened, the Mahabharata text also tells us that the Dwarka was flooded and destroyed 36 years after the war. So 5561 BC plus 36, this is a BC business, we get to 5525 BC. And then it's because it was flooded, right, by ocean. So I was looking for oceanography data. And the oceanography data came flooding to me from all around the globe. Okay, and in the question answer, we can talk more about it. But geology, archaeology, hydrology, climatology, agriculture, hydronomy, paleontology, paleobotany, chronology, genetics, guys. Okay, and I have a video on that too. Genealogy of kings, Veda Shakha Pravachan, Rigveda also fits very nicely. Travel records of the Greek travelers like Megasthenes and whatnot. I mean, that all starts coming together, because of course here I know that 5561 is what I have come from astronomy, and in that context I am looking at all this data. Okay, all right. So quickly my work, because I just shared highlights of just Mahabharata. What I just showed you, and I just showed you a glimpse of it, I did the same thing for Ramayana. Okay, then I published it in 2014. I was studying Ramayana in parallel also. Again, they say don't put all eggs in one basket. Like if you have to take Bhagavad Gita's verse, adhishtanam tatha karta karanam cha pruthak vidam vividhascha pruthak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. By luck you may be succeed. So vividhascha pruthak cheshta. So don't put all eggs in one basket. I was studying Ramayana also, trying to see if I can determine the dating of Ramayana. So in case of Valmiki Ramayana, I found, to my surprise, actually many more astronomy observations than Mahabharata. I found close to 600 in Ramayana. And when they are solved as a jigsaw puzzle, that took me to 12,209 BC as the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha. So that I wrote that book, what is that? The Historic Rama, or 12,209 BC in India. And then very recently, meaning 2016, a professor here from Boston, he asked me, well, this is great, you're done. Can you do something on the Rigveda, or do you think you can do on Rigveda? So I was working in parallel, not so much on the Rigveda, but only to the extent it has to do with a river Saraswati, because river Saraswati comes in Ramayana and Mahabharata. And just by my luck, I would say, Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam. This professor asked me in December 2016, and the conference was on an international conference on the river Saraswati in January. And so I said, okay, let me see what I can do. Give me a couple of weeks. And by luck, actually, when I started putting together, so sometimes the magic can happen in a very short time. In less than 2 weeks, actually, the thing is, I was studying this. So it's not like I started studying. I had studied Srikant Talagiri's work, David Frawley's work, and so on. But as far as the dating goes, I essentially did that in 2 weeks. And there is some wonderful thing about it. So I showed that the Rigveda, definitely the last portions from 6th millennium BC, which is same as Mahabharata time, but the oldest portion definitely go beyond 22,000 BCE. No doubt, no ifs, no buts. Now, this was in 2016. To my surprise, a pleasant surprise, so much evidence for Saraswati is coming out since then, and it supports every single new paper comes, it supports wholeheartedly that particular timeline. So, okay, with that, I'll just fast forward to that quickly. Last slide here. Now people see again now, so I gave you some information here, right? Some people might have read my books before, some of you might have watched my videos, and you might have your different reactions, and that's very natural, and that's how it should be. Okay, some of you might have taken with Shraddha, others might have a samshay. It's all very healthy. So how people should deal with it, and this is not just with my work, this is true for everything, right? One simple way is you can accept it on a Shraddha, we can say, and then share with others. Hey, okay, somebody asked you, when did the Mahabharata war happen? You say 5561 BCE, more than 7,500 years ago. They say, how do you know? He says, well, so and so Nilesh, he said it. That's fine, but we don't have to stop there. So objectively testable evidence exists, but everyone doesn't want to know astronomy. Everyone doesn't understand logical reasoning. Everyone doesn't understand how the scientific growth of knowledge works and whatnot. That's all fine, but just some reference point here. But something interesting, if you are not convinced on the Shraddha, and that's not a bad thing, that is a very good thing. In fact, we must go beyond Shraddha always. Okay, Shraddha is always there, that Karya Shakti, but we have to do some Karya. So if you are not convinced just because somebody said it, and that's a good thing, then you should study deeply, be convinced. So that's when the Swadhyaya and your use of intellect comes into the picture. After studying it, instead of being convincing yourself, if you are not convinced, then you can critique it. And I say critique it brutally and logically. When I published my first book, since then I changed, by the way, guys, but what did I know? I mean, I was like a chemical engineer selling aircraft engines and power plants and plastics. I didn't know this whole space of Mahabharata research. So I found who the Mahabharata researchers are. Okay, when I was writing a book, I found them. I sent 50 copies to 50 Mahabharata researchers. Okay, either from Indian background or a non-Indian background. Only 2 people acknowledged the receipt of the book. Okay, but other than Dr. Vartak and Professor R.N. Iyengar, nobody even bothered to acknowledge it. And then I learned, there is no point. Dr. Vartak told me, hey, you send them the books. That's why they were not even interested. That's a different subject. But my point is, critique it. And in that note, when I sent the book, I literally wrote a note, I mean, to everyone, the same note. And I said, please critique it brutally, logically, shred it to the pieces. That's the language I used. Well, they chose not to open the book, many of them anyways. So my point is, please critique it brutally, logically. And even further, the better thing would be if you can present an alternate or a superior claim, because that is our Darshana tradition. See, when one Acharya came and he put forward his theory, they do the Purva Paksha, and now he puts forward a different theory and he says why that is better. If you can present an alternate and superior claim, great, and let people decide. Okay, that's actually a seva. And then the fifth one, because then people take a lot of time on the social media, emails. I mean, I get 50 to 200 emails a week, and I have to find some IT expert to figure out how to deal with them. But so last one, I say, if somebody asks something, not really interested, wasting time, I say take a hike, or in a very, very polite language, that, oh, Manita, Namro language, I say, get lost. Okay, that's a Samshayatma and a Tamas kind of thing. All right, these are my books. If you're in India, Subbu publication, you can order online. The names are same except the historic Rama. It's called there 12,209 BC. If you are outside India, like through Amazon, you can have these books, some of the books that I'm working on. And I'm going to stop here. I will stop sharing also, and let's get into some question and answer. Hopefully, thank you for listening. Hopefully I did not bore you or did not give you something heavy stuff. So I will give it back to Meghanaji, and I don't know how you do the question answer, but we'll find a way. So if you want to unmute, if you want to ask a question, if you can unmute and ask the question, and maybe Meghanaji, how do you want to do it?
No, I think I'll let others, whoever has questions, okay, just say, I have a question, and they will ask the question.
Okay.
I think it'll be easier that way.
So I'll go first.
Please.
I am now, my wife tells me I'm hard of hearing, and I myself admit that I'm hard of understanding too. So, question, the simulation that you showed, the meridian goes through the North Pole. And in one slide, you showed the position of the North Pole, which has changed due to precession of the Earth. Does the simulation take into account the viewpoint from the perspective of the movement of the precession?
Okay. So I'll just repeat the question. So the simulation that I showed and the North NCP, that pole point, North Celestial Point, is changing. Does it take into account the effect of the precession? Okay, the answer is yes. In fact, it is the precession. Because of the precession, we are having these three different scenarios, which is to say, in our times, when if you go right now at night and throughout the night you watch it, you are going to see a Vasishta comes first and then Arundhati with a binocular, whatever you want to do. If you go backwards for 6,000 years, that's the same scenario. Some slight changes will happen, but always Vasishta ahead, Arundhati behind. Then the 2 years that I showed, that no one is ahead, no one is behind, like 10 to 48 and 46, 36. And between those two years, like 5,000 year period, Arundhati will be always ahead. All of this is happening very much because of the precession. If there was no precession, we would not have seen these changes. Okay, so yes, it not only it takes into account the precession. In fact, if we don't take precession into account, we will never able to see Arundhati ahead when we do the simulation.
The second part to that question is Vasishta, which is Mizar, Alcor. They are actually two stars, and Vasishta Arundhati is a triplet binary.
Correct.
Third, is it possible that Mizar A and B could be distorting our viewpoint?
Okay, so the question that has been asked is that this is a binary system. Okay, so let's even start with Arundhati and Vasishta as a binary system. Okay, they are also assumed to be binary, and there is no like a final conclusive thing by anyone right now. But it is about how much resolution you want to do, how much magnification you want to do. You can go to Wikipedia and also check that. So when actually initially they thought that's a binary. When they started magnifying it, then they found that Arundhati has its own binary. Mizar has its own binary. And it could be like, I don't know even what's the word, but the quadruplate or something, the four of them kind of combined together. Then if you go further resolution, you find even there are more, possibly up to 6. I mean, so that's all that is there.
Yes.
Okay, I will simplify it by saying this is all true. And this is a very frequently asked question. So, oh, they are binaries and therefore are they going around each other? Yeah, if they're binary, they have to go around each other. A speculative, by astronomers, a speculative time period what you can say, not predicted, a proposed for the whatever the motion they have studied for Arundhati around Vasishta, around all that, is like 750,000 years. But no one has actually, there is no sufficient evidence to even show whether that is true or not. Be it as it may, what we are discussing here, and say for example, just for a simplicity, let's say last 200,000 years, because no one is saying Mahabharata war happened more than that. You know, we are talking 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 years. The motion of Arundhati and Vasishta going ahead or Arundhati behind or whatnot has absolutely nothing, zero, zilch, to do with the fact that they are binary or triplet or quadruplet. So that is the answer. That is true, but that has nothing to do with the visual observation of who is ahead, who is behind in say last 200,000 years.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question.
Please.
You were talking about astronomy, that Arundhati was falling and then they changed. Has the geography changed from that point as of today, where Mahabharata took place back then, versus what we are assuming that it happened here, Hastinapur and all that.
Correct. So 7,000. So now 5561 BC, just for simplicity, let's call it 7,500 years ago. Has the geography changed? As far as the broad contours of a geography, absolutely nothing has changed. Zero. Now, what has changed? For example, say river courses. Every time a flood comes, a river can change its course. I mean, right now you can go to Google and look at Ganga or look at Satluj, and you will see change of courses, and that turns into the lakes and whatnot. So those small changes have taken place. But because you asked that question, and that's a very good question, let me also tell you, not just limiting to 7,500 years ago, but going back, I'll quickly walk you through 100,000 years of geography history, specifically with respect to the river, and especially Saraswati River, which kind of like a lifeline for the Indian civilization. You know, the Rigvedas, Giribhya, Samudra, Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame, Saraswati, the grandest of the grand river, Saraswati. So just for a discussion purpose, I'll go to 100,000 years ago, 1 lakh years. 1 lakh years ago, 100,000 years ago, Saraswati River existed. Now, this is not just my word. Actually, there is a 35 years of data. I mean, again, another Marathi Bandhav, if you have heard the name Padma Shri Wakankar, you know, he started doing the Saraswati study going back 50, 60, 70 years ago, and did a wonderful job. And then now with all the modern technologies, InSat photography, this and that, they can actually go and take the Earth course. They can note down the crystals that this river can bring, and the signature of that crystal, so to say, can tell you which river was carrying those. There's so much research that has taken place. I'll just go for last 35 years. So just starting with say 1986 or so, Mary Courtier of France, she started that study. Frankfurt, again, Henry Frankfurt from France, 1992. You know, Peter Clift, 2012, and very recently, 2017, Singh and all from IIT Kanpur, UK, Dave, Khonde. I mean, just so many people. All of this research is telling us this. So 100,000 years ago, that's where we begin in an artificial way, let's say, Saraswati was very huge and flowing beautifully. That was the case until I'll tell you when the time is, but around 50,000 BC, and now additional research tells us between 50,000 BC and 40,000 BC, Yamuna River, which was also part of Saraswati, split from Saraswati. So I'm answering your geographical changes possibly. Split from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga. Okay, and that happened sometime between 50,000 BC and 40,000 BC. Okay, now this has a huge implications. Today that is not the subject, but it has a huge implications for Ramayana. Do you know why? Because Ramayana talks about Yamuna meeting Ganga, like even Rama crosses it. Actually, the references come many times. Even Kumbhakarna talks about Yamuna meeting Ganga as a metaphor when he's describing something. Now, that is Ramayana, but Yamuna is meeting Ganga only after 50,000 BC. So those people, you know, I mean, in the Indian context, you know, right? Some people do believe Ramayana happened million years ago, multi-million years ago. They have to answer this question. So where is the Yamuna meeting Ganga? Geographically, the evidence is not there. Now let's come to 22,000 BC, because that's another beautiful evidence. That is the time of LGM, last glacial maximum. Okay, and again, I'll not go into detail unless you ask a specific question. But a good amount of water was frozen. In the North America was covered with ice sheets and whatnot. And that's why the sea levels had gone down to 120, 140 meters down in comparison to what they are today. But say if you go to 24,000 years. And so that possibly might have an effect actually even also on the rain and snow melting and whatnot. So suddenly you actually have evidence that says that the Saraswati water, the grand Saraswati, the Mahasaraswati became Saraswati by around that 22,000 BC. In fact, that is the reference I used to show why the oldest portion of Rigveda must go before that. Okay, so that's that's another geographical change. Then you come to 13,000 BC, and it's again a beautiful evidence for Ramayana. in 13,000 BC, again, this is a this Singh paper from IIT Kanpur, like 2017. What it shows is that the Satluj River, if you have gone to Rupanagar, in the Punjab area, Satluj, and if you see the old paleo channels, that Satluj used to come straight down to south. Yamuna is coming from the east, Satluj is coming from the west, so to say. They meet together, and that was Saraswati. But in 13,000 BCE, suddenly Satluj turned westward, and then it went all the way to meet Ravi or those other rivers, and eventually Sindhu. Now, why is that important? Because again, in Valmiki Ramayana, we have a description when Bharat is coming from Kekaya to Ayodhya, when he is crossing the rivers, the description of Satluj River, Shatudri or Shatudri, it says that beautiful river with a big patra, big expanse, the one that is flowing in the west direction. So at the time of Valmiki Ramayana, Satluj is flowing west and not south. And from modern research, we know that that happened only 13,000 BCE, which means the Ramayana cannot happen before 13,000 BCE. Okay, so that's kind of very interesting. Now, that's not how I decided the timing. I had done it 2014. This paper is from 2017. So it's a very powerful corroborative evidence for that. And then what happened after this Satluj turned? So now Yamuna is no longer there. Satluj is no longer there. And slowly the Saraswati became smaller and smaller and smaller. Then there was a rejuvenation of a monsoon. So around like 7,000 BC to 4,500 BC. That is the Mahabharata time. Therefore, Mahabharata Saraswati is a very mixed state. I will not elaborate on that. I took a lot of time on this. And then after 4,500 BC, Saraswati quickly dried. And there are different estimates like 3,000 BC. Some people say 2,000 BC. Definitely by 2000 BC, Saraswati was gone. So this was one significant change as far as the rivers are concerned. But otherwise, as far as the geographical landscape is concerned, it is exactly the same. Not just now, it is essentially same for, I don't know, 100,000 years or more.
माझा प्रश्न ऋग्वेदाबद्दल आहे. तुम्ही आता म्हणालात की 22,000 BC हा साधारणपणे ऋग्वेदाचा काळ, हा तर खूपच प्राचीन काळ झाला. म्हणजे आपले अँसेस्टर्स तर त्याच्याहूनही आधी त्या भागात असण्याची शक्यता आहे. पण मग हे आपल्याला कुठल्या उत्खननात किंवा असं काही कसं आपल्याला सापडलं नाही.
ओके गुड. सो मी आता मराठीतून उत्तर देऊ याचं का कसं देऊ?
नाही, इंग्लिश मधनं. I mean, I should have asked you in English.
No, fine. Okay. So the question she asked is, so even if you look at the Rigveda timing as 22,000 BC, that sounds very far. Okay. I mean, so in the conference when I say, because even our pro-Indic researchers are also stuck into 8,000 BC and after. So when I say 22,000 BC or a Ramayana 12,209 BC, I ask them to hold on to their chair, hang on to their chair so that they don't fall from it. Okay. To answer this question, so why we not find it? So and Meghana ji, you might have to respond to that, which just as for fun is like, what are we looking for? Okay, what is that evidence that we are looking for that will possibly convince us that yeah, someone was there?
Well, any archaeological evidence of
great
their existence.
Yeah, very good. And so what happens is, again, not you are doing it, but see, our archaeologist, and when I say our, I mean definitely the Indian archaeologist or archaeologists working in the Indian scene, but that is true for most archaeologists. Unfortunately, they are hard workers, by the way. It's a lot of work to do any archaeology. The challenge is, I have yet to meet archaeologists. Maybe there are a couple in the whole world I'm talking, not just India. They do a very good job of digging and finding objects. They also do a very good job of dating them. But when you have to bring those together as a triangle of explanation, prediction, testing, okay, and I'm very good, I'm recording it as I said, they are disaster. There is no other word. So what happens is they get into this paradox, not paradox, they get into this problem of absence of evidence is equal to evidence of absence. What any archaeologist in the group? No? Okay. So I can bluff. Okay. What happens is, what we actually find in archaeology, you go to a museum and you feel, oh, there's a lot of stuff that we found in archaeology. But in reality, what you do end up finding in archaeological studies, archaeological digs, is actually 0.000001% of what actually was there. And it's like a Daivam Chevatra Panchamam. What we end up finding is this. Second problem. The second problem, for most part, the archaeologists have limited this archaeology down to finding the pots and pans and some hooks and some metal object and some stuff like this. And we do find them. For example, in the Indian archaeology, you find objects, metal objects or some kind of object, pots and pans, going to 9,000 years, going back to 7,000 BC and beyond. But as you go back, you find less and less. Okay, so that's point number 2. The third point, where do you find these archaeological objects, whether in India or outside? If you go to South America, if you go to Amazon, wherever it is, or Middle Eastern, you find the objects and archaeological objects and you can date them in those places where there nothing exists now, which is to say you find a mound and you say, ah, this looks interesting, there is something was there, and they start digging, they find something. Same thing in India, like Rakhigadi and Kalibanga, if you have heard these names. But what about, say, a place like say Kashi, Varanasi, or Prayagraj, like, or Ayodhya, looking for evidence of a Rama's time? Well, the civilization is still there. So you actually don't, you cannot dig it. That is a practical challenge. But the other aspect is, if something existed, and especially as you go back, I mean, just go our generation, couple of generations back in India. I mean, don't you know our grandparents, like they had these pots and pans and metal things that they from like forever. I mean, Marathi hadpa, you know, they used to have a hadpa, and these pots will be kept, and they're always there. I mean, they're just like on the ladies' side, they always take pride. Oh, this my grandmother gave me this, the particular jewelry or something like this. You also find these objects. So these metal objects, being precious or all that, they were used, reused, and so on and so forth. So that is another thing. Last fourth point. If we expand the definition of archaeology, we get out of the pots and pans and a fish hook, then I will tell you there is enough of archaeology evidence. Like the last slide that I showed you, like agriculture. If you consider agriculture as archaeology evidence, then let me share some things with you. We have a wonderful evidence of a established agriculture in Indian subcontinent, like Sri Lanka, for example, going to 16,000 BC.
Wow.
Well, if you are startled, get ready for this one.
Wow.
We have a evidence of established agriculture in the sense of not necessarily planting, because see, that's what happens as you go back in time, the evidence is going to get less and less just because of the time factor. But we have evidence again in the Indian subcontinent, now actually even in Andhra Pradesh also, but again in Sri Lanka, of a established harvesting practices. Maybe they didn't have to plant, we don't know that, they could be planting, but harvesting of grains and use of the grains, storage of grains, cooking of grains, everything going back to, listen to this, 43,000 BCE. These are peer-reviewed papers. 43,000 years BCE, 45,000 years ago. So this is just agriculture. If you look at genetics, now genetics is becoming very fascinating. I'll send you the link how a genetic evidence, Monica Carmin's paper 2015, who has nothing to do with the Mahabharata. She may not even know the word Mahabharata. She may not even able to say the word Mahabharata. A paper that she has written, and again, usually if you have known the genetic papers, there are like 50 authors, you know, because they're all collecting samples and they put their names. I have shown how that evidence of Monica Carmin paper 2015 papers perfectly matches to 5561 Mahabharata evidence.
Wow.
Okay, and I have actually a talk on that. I mean, I can send you the link. So if you consider now archaeogenetics, archaeoagriculture, are you with me what I'm talking? If you consider not just limited to pots and pans, then you just name it, seismology and genetics and physical anthropology. If you have heard of Bhimbetaka, I was there in this past January near Bhopal. Like, you know, there are these human presence, human paintings, and they are dated to like 10,000 BC, 20,000 BC, 40,000 BC, and going all the way to 100,000 years ago. So there is a human presence. Narmada man or Narmada woman, that goes back to 250,000 years ago. I mean, this is not new information. This is going back 40 years, 50 years, or so on. So so if you consider a fossil as archaeology evidence, then we have a human presence that long. Lahur Deva in UP, that goes to 10,000 BC, agriculture in rice and whatnot.
मेघना, मला प्रश्न आहे. निलेश, मी मराठीतूनच विचारणार आहे, कारण माझं काही कॉन्व्हेंट मध्ये शिक्षण झालेलं नाहीये.
नाही, माझं पण नाही.
मला मराठीमध्ये जास्त कम्फर्टेबल. दोन प्रश्न आहेत माझ्याकडे. ते असे की जसं भीष्म पर्वामध्ये आता तुम्ही उल्लेख केला की अरुंधती आणि वसिष्ठ या नक्षत्रांचा उपयोग आपल्याला टाइम लाईन ठरवण्यासाठी जे श्लोकांमधून आपण ठरवू शकलो किंवा आपण त्याचा रेफरन्स मिळाला, तसा रामायणाच्या बाबतीमध्ये रेफरन्सेस कसे मिळाले?
रामायणाचे रेफरन्सेस सुद्धा तसेच. मी तुम्हाला एक उदाहरण म्हणून काही सांगेन. सो द क्वेश्चन इज the way I found the Arundhati Vasishtha reference, and by the way, so Mahabharata references also go like this, just to give you a flavor, you know. For example, so reference to say Jupiter and Saturn. Savatsarasthainancho graha prajulito vubhav vishakhayo samipasto brahaspati shanaishcharo. For up to a year, these two planets, you know, Saturn and Jupiter, were brightly blazing and have settled in one place near Nakshatra Vishakha, in the vicinity of Vishakha. What I just said, I read this. Okay. Shukram proshtapade purve samaruya vishampate uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. The planet Shukra, the Venus, okay, it came near proshtapade purve, Purva Bhadrapada. Okay, so came near Purva Bhadrapada. Uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. By turning north, uttaretu parikramya. Parikrama apan mandirat karto na. Uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. If you go and look at the simulation 5561 BC plus minus 1 year for all these planets, you will see Shukra comes right to Purva Bhadrapada, turns north near Uttara Bhadrapada, goes back all the way to Shatabhishaj, makes a complete circle and goes further. That is its retrograde motion.
Wow.
If you look at a Mars, Dhruvam prajulitam ghoram apasavya pravartate chitra swatyantare chaiva dhishtita parushagra vakranu vakram krutvam cha shravane pavaka prabha brahma rashi samavrutta lohitango vyavastita. See, once you get into it, you start visualizing this. I mean, to me, and now I'm doing it for 10 years, no? So it's kind of easy. I'm just saying this to impress you guys, you know, just this verses. Okay, now the question, how we do it in the Ramayana. Exactly similar. For example, Ramayana times, and you tell me the time, but Ramayana times, and if you have a time, we'll do it maybe another time, or I'll send you the simulation. At the time of Ramayana, remember now we notice because of precession, the pole star changes, the pole point changes, right? And wherever Earth's axis is pointing, if there is a bright star, we call it that pole star. Right now we call it Polaris, Dhruva Matsya. If you go back to 3000 BC, the Thuban was a pole star. And our literature talks about it. It talks about it as the tail star of the Shishumar, it says, that Draco constellation. Now come to Ramayana. So just to answer your question, I'm giving you the context. So Ramayana is talking of the pole star of Ramayana times. Do you know what it says? The Brahma Rashi, which means Abhijit, which means Vega in English, modern astronomy. That was a pole star of Ramayana times. So the Ramayana astronomy reference comes like this. When they all are living from Kishkinda towards Lanka, Hanuman has returned and now they are going, and Lakshman is describing what he's seeing in the sky. They are going and they need a reference point. Those times, pole star was a reference point, whether you're going on the ocean or whatnot. And he says, Lakshman says, Brahma Rashir Vishuddhascha Shuddhascha Paramarshaya Archishmanta Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. So Brahma Rashi, Vega, Abhijit has become a pole star, and the Saptarshi and all other stars are going around it. Okay. If you just do that simulation, it will go to 12,000 BC. Anyone from Nashik here originally? No. So when they are in the Nashik, you know, and then Hemanta Rutu comes, which is right now Hemanta Rutu, by the way, you know, 2 months before 21st December is a Hemanta Rutu. And it's very, very cold that time. You know, we are talking 12,000 BCE. Okay. There was even used to be snow in Nasik at that time. And there are very cold descriptions and all that. And so Lakshman is again saying the different times they're describing the Hemanta Rutu. He says Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushya Nita Himaruna. Okay, Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushya Nita Himaruna. He's saying sun is setting near Nakshatra Pushya during this Hemanta Rutu. If we do this today, I mean, you can actually go out and see if there is a clear sky. You will sunset. So tomorrow, sunset, you will find after sunset, if you look at which nakshatra you see, you will see it is a Mula nakshatra, like a Jeshtha Mula. Somewhere that's where the sun sets. Again, we have to use the precession of equinoxes to find out a time when it will be such a time that after sunset during the Hemanta Rutu, there has to be a Pushya nakshatra. That takes you back 14,000 years. Brahma Rashi also takes you 14,000 years. And then the Chaitra, see Chaitra month, right? Rama's Janma, Rama's birth date. Now it comes very hot, right?
Sure.
Right now it's very, very hot. If you're celebrated in India, not so much in America. But the descriptions of a Ramayana, of a Chaitra months are extremely pleasant. Okay, just after the rain, Chaitram Sri Manayam Masa Punya Pushpita Kanana Yava Rajaya Ramasya, that's what the description is. So these are the kind of references. See, references to season, planets, and so on.
Right. आणि दुसरा प्रश्न माझा असा की रिगार्डलेस ऑफ द टाइम लाईन जे आम्ही ऐकलेलं आहे की मी जे ऐकलेलं आहे ते असं की कुरुक्षेत्राचं युद्ध झाल्यानंतर व्यासांनी युद्धाचं वर्णन लिहिलं 24,000 ओव्यांमध्ये किंवा तत्सम याच्यामध्ये आणि त्याला जय असं नाव दिलं.
बरोबर.
त्यानंतर जनमेजयाच्या दरबारामध्ये वैशंपायनानं त्याचं वाचन केलं आणि त्यामध्ये ओव्यांमध्ये भर घातली आणि त्याला भारत नाव दिलं. आणि त्यानंतर 2,500 वर्षांनी किंवा टाइमलाईन प्रमाणे केव्हाही सौतीने त्याचं आपल्याला आज जे अभिप्रेत आहे ते महाभारत लिहिलं. तर ही जी प्रोसेस आहे महाभारत लिहिण्याची ती रिगार्डलेस ऑफ द टाइम ही अशीच तुम्हाला अभिप्रेत आहे का दुसरं काही त्याच्या मागे?
Okay. So I'll go to English. So quickly, what he said is, and this is what you might have or may not have heard, is this. It is what is the best word? It is assumption of many people, especially those who have never bothered to read Mahabharata. Okay,
Yes.
Is this that Vyasa wrote Mahabharata after the Mahabharata war? That is correct. But then when Vyasa wrote, he wrote only 24,000 verses. Then Vaishampayan, his disciple, extended it to, Vyasa wrote even less than 24,000. That is the very claim, I'll come to that, how bad that claim is. Then Vaishampayan extended to 24,000 years. And then Sauti, Lomaharshana Sauti, Romaharshana Sauti, he expanded and further additions kept on happening. And now what we have is 125,000 verses. You will hear that from well-known, famous Mahabharata researchers.
Correct.
Okay, and in American language, it's a total BS. Okay, pure BS. Okay, absolutely BS, utterly nonsensical, careless, and casual nonsense. If somebody simply opens the Mahabharata text and starts reading it, they will find a picture which is exactly opposite of that. And when I question these people and I say, what is your evidence? The very famous names, by the way, guys, okay, extremely famous names. I will not ask you to guess those, but you can. No, they just run away. They just don't bother, and then they will call me arrogant. They will call me all kinds of things. I enjoy that. I'm a sales guy. People can slam the door in my face and then I'll get their business again, next 6 months. Okay. So what is the reality? If you go to Adi Parva, the first chapter, and I don't know the verse number right now, 80, whatever, but you can find out. And I have written a blog and I think I sent that blog link in the question answer session today. What the statement says is this. It says Vyasa wrote Mahabharata. Actually, quickly, let's go at who wrote when. So Mahabharata tells us that Vyasa wrote Mahabharata approximately 18 years after the war. And it took him 3 years to write it. And before anyone is confused, how long it took Vyasa to write it, how it is in the Mahabharata, I'll come to that in a minute. Okay. So then, so the statement first Adhyay will say that there are 8,800 verses. These are very mysterious and guhya, very difficult to decipher type of verses. Vyasa knows what that is, what they mean. Shuka knows that means. Maybe a couple other person know. I don't know if Sanjay knows it or not. That is the statement. There are, in the Mahabharata, there are 8,800 verses which are very secretive, you can say. That somebody, some person who doesn't know what to do with it, said that is the original Vyasa. And again, the Western Indologists have done nonsense. But just let's not blame them. I mean, why are we, swallowing it?
Correct.
Just right. Then, if you go just few verses further, then it says Vyasa wrote 100,000 verse Mahabharata. Vaishampayan removed the Upakhyan from that great Mahabharata, 100,000 verse Mahabharata, and created a smaller 24,000 verse long Bharata Samhita.
Oh, the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Wow. Thank you. That was good.
Thank you.
Well, since we're talking about number of verses, another claim has been, since Gita came out of Mahabharata, the original Gita was not 700 verses, and Vyasa was not the only original writer. There may have been additional disciples of him who may have added to come to 700, because based on the books that we have been reading, the first known translation of Gita is Adi Shankaracharya, 700 AD.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I'm sure was there, but it's not in vogue. So what is your opinion on that?
Very good, great question. So everyone understood that, right? The question is, the original Bhagavad Gita may not be part of this, maybe less verses, they got added. And what is my opinion? Well, I mean, just for fun, I'm saying that, Meghanaji, I don't have opinion, and I don't like opinions. Okay, because everyone has an opinion. Okay, and that doesn't have much value. How many of you have heard the name Christopher Hitchens, a sort of a famous atheist? No, a British guy. He passed away just a few years ago. Okay, there is something he calls Hitchens razor. His last name, Hitchens razor. And this is what the Hitchens razor says. He says any claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Okay, what you will find, I mean, Meghanaji, what you said is correct. I mean, I have heard that. In fact, I can tell you the name, Gasri Khair. If you have heard that name, Gasri Khair, for example, proposed from Pune, proposed that there were 3 different layers to Bhagavad Gita, 3 different authors, and he has claimed that there are many others, say all kinds of things. Bhagavad Gita was inserted afterwards, and so on and so forth. Okay, so great question again you are asking. So no, I don't have an opinion, but I'll tell you what is my assertion. And the assertion means is backed by evidence, backed by empirically testable evidence. Okay, the evidence will show you that Bhagavad Gita is very much part of Mahabharata. Now, to the verses, like some verses getting added and all, that is possible. Okay, that you find. What happened is people were writing these things and they were copying on the Bhojapatra or whatever the different bark things they were doing. Many times, right now we take the notes. The person studying also may make a note there. And they could even make a note in the shloka so that it can be remembered. And those notes got copied. Many times when you're copying from one to the next, you cannot see the word. There are things like that. For example, Somasya Putra Vyavrittam. When some copies you see Yamasya Putra Vyavrittam. Because, if you take Bhandarkar Oriental, you will say that all the time. I mean, that's the beauty of a Bhandarkar. My point is, now I'll come to that in another way. But my point is, in spite of that, in spite of these challenges, when you look at this 300 plus evidence, it points to one year and no other. So even when there are some problems like changes, interpolation, transcription error, transliteration error, transposition error, in spite of it, whatever evidence that you can decipher, it takes you to that particular thing, it is preserved damn well. That's one thing. Okay, the second thing to the Bhagavad Gita, and that this question, by the way, today we are not talking, but it also is asked about the Uttarakanda of Ramayana. Many people are under the impression that Uttarakanda is a separate thing and it's added later and so on. Well, the name says it's Uttarakanda, it's appendix. So yes, it was added later, but later meaning what? Not after 2,500 years ago. It is very much added in the Valmiki times. Maybe Valmiki's disciple, Valmiki himself, we don't know that. But let's talk about Bhagavad Gita. How many of you know that there are references in Bhagavad Gita that will take you to 6th millennium BCE, which is the time of 5561 BCE? Masa, yeah, have you done Vibhuti Yoga by now? Masanam Margashrishoyam, Rutunam Kusumakara, right? Or Nakshatranam Aham Shashi. As now all our acharyas, because see again, acharyas are using Bhagavad Gita for a different purpose, like bhakti, jnana, and other niti, which they are not using it for astronomy purpose. But essentially, without exception, every acharya has translated that verse wrong. Nakshatrana Maham Shashi, right from Shankaracharya to whoever you want to count. How do they translate Nakshatrana Maham Shashi? Among the nakshatras, I am the moon. You can check any translation. That is absolutely not the meaning of that verse. The nakshatra, see, Vyasa or whoever even wrote Bhagavad Gita, let's for a minute, let's say it's not Vyasa. Okay, they exactly knew what nakshatra meant. They knew that the Chandra is not the nakshatra.
Yeah.
Okay, the nakshatras are known also by their deity. Like Shashikanji asked the reference, how the reference comes. When the reference to Rohini comes in Mahabharata, it comes not as a Rohini. Sometimes it comes as a Rohini, but other times it comes Prajapatyam cha nakshatram grahat tikshna mahadyuti Shaneshchara pideti pidayan pranikodikam, or it says Bhagam nakshatram akramya suryaputrena pidate. These are nakshatra devatas. That is how the nakshatra is identified. So when it says nakshatrana maham shashi, it is saying that nakshatra whose devata is a shashi. Anyone knows what that nakshatra is? Not from astrology, by the way, from astronomy.
Rohini.
No. The nakshatra devata of that nakshatra whose nakshatra devata is a Soma or Chandra. That is nakshatra Mrugashirsha. So it is referring to the Mrugashirsha. Now you start suddenly bringing it together. So Mrugashirsha nakshatra for some reason is important. Masana Margashirshoyam. Now, what is so big deal about Margashirsha? If you go, I mean, we don't have a time and I don't want to take time on that, maybe some other time, but that Margashirsha is the first month of a Sharad season. If you go to Anushasan Parva, you will find chapter 106 and 109, I think, in Anushasan Parva. There are these, how to do upvas on a Dwadashi of every month or something is being discussed, or full moon. And if you look at the calendar, it starts with a Margashirsha, it ends with Kartik. In the Mahabharata times, of course, any times there are different calendars existing. In our times, we have the English calendar, we have the Indian Chaitra calendar, we have another calendar that begins with a Kartika. You know that, right? The Bali Pratipada, that's another calendar we begin, right? The business people close their books and start a new calendar. Anytime there are multiple calendars, even Mahabharata times had multiple calendars, but one of the important calendar of a Mahabharata time began with a Margashirsha. And that was the month of a Sharad season. If you understand Margashirsha as a Sharad season, first part of the Sharad season, just like we do the Chaitra, Gudi Padwa, immediately in just, I didn't have a time to discuss that, the effect of precession of equinoxes, what it does to the lunar months. It shifts the lunar month with respect to season by 1 month every 2000 years. Right now, Margashirsha is going to come now, right? It will be Margashirsha at the 21st December. Mahabharata is telling you it was the first month of Sharad season. So there are 4 months. First month of Sharad season, second month of Sharad season, first month of Hemanta, second month of Hemanta. 4 months. 4 times 2 is 8,000. Mahabharata happened 8,000 years ago. The pure Bhagavad Gita will take you to the Mahabharata time. That just tells you the consistency of Bhagavad Gita with rest of the Mahabharata.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
My question is this: you just talked about different calendars during Mahabharata time.
Yeah.
The problem I'm having is there was an issue with Kauravas about either 13 years or 1 year of Ajnatavasa. Why was that then?
Okay, but what is the problem? So Ajnatavas, they decided that is some rules and conditions, right?
No, but no, they had agreed to a certain 1 year of Ajnatavas and 12 years of exile.
Correct.
So if you had a calendar,
yeah,
you would have known, yeah, it was over on this particular day.
Correct.
But when Arjuna finally exposes himself by
Yeah.
fighting in that war,
Right.
they argue, the Kauravas argue that he has violated their agreement.
Correct. Correct.
If they had a calendar, why was this disagreement?
Okay, great question. Okay, so then Bhishmacharya actually responds to Duryodhan, right?
Yes.
You know that answer too, right? Bhishmacharya says, well, hold on. In every 5 years, there are approximately 2 extra months that they come, right?
Greek
You
mass.
know that verse. It's in my book and all. So then he says, therefore, based on that, they have already completed 13 years. That's what Bhishmacharya says. And Duryodhana is not convinced. In the long run, it doesn't matter anyways, because Duryodhana had no plans to give anything, whether they completed 13 years or not, right? So that's a different issue. But back to your question. So if they had a calendar, so why did this happen? Let me ask you a question to all of you. Yes, we use our Gregorian calendar for all purposes, and with now the smartphones, it shows every minute, what day it is, and so on and so forth. When it was not there, just going back, say 30 years, how did we keep track of timekeeping? We used to have a Kala Nirnay, something stuff like that, some diaries, physical diaries we used to have and check the thing. But Kala Nirnay, that's how we did it. How many of you use, if you are doing, so you're Gita student, if you do some upwas, like Ekadashi upwas, Chaturthi, anyone Ekadashi upwas, Chaturthi upwas kind of folks? Okay, so how do you find it? How do you find it? Now maybe with a smartphone, right? Something like this. But before you would have used the Kal Nirnay. Okay, if you go back further, before Sargaonkar came up with the Kal Nirnay, now how many of you know that I have now Bharat Dinadarshika with Mahabharata Samvat 7581, collaboration with Date Panchang, the oldest Panchang, by the way, 100 plus years of tradition. And it is updated on a Twitter every morning, 5:30 a.m. India time. Okay. And the application, the app is also in works and whatnot, but Mahabharata Samvat, people are, see, by the way, this I started this this past April, like few months ago. Now, and I want you to encourage you to do that if you are convinced about this, by the way. If you are not convinced, you should not use 5561 BC. But the point is, right now, the Ayurvedacharyas are actually using Mahabharata Samvat, not everyone, a good number of them who are convinced of my research work, on their prescription pad. They actually, every day they change it, Mahabharata Samvat, this tithi, that tithi, and then actually they do it. But back to your question. So if you go back before Jain Sargaonkar, and his Kala Nirnay, and go further back, many years when the Panchangas not necessarily were readily available, how did people figure it out? People figure it out by actually watching the position of the moon.
Moon.
Okay.
Lunar calendar.
Lunar calendar. Lunisolar. India was a lunisolar calendar. And these fights, therefore, did happen. It is not only in the Mahabharata. Do you know the fight between Modak and Tilak and S.B. Dikshit, the Tilak Panchang versus Nirnay Sagar Panchang? How many of you use Tilak Panchang? No? Have you heard of Tilak Panchang?
Yes.
Okay. So as a child, growing up, you might have known this, that, sometimes the very few people will follow Tilak Panchang, typically. And so sometime when the Adhik Mas comes at a different point, that was their disagreement. Okay. So this is a good way to answer it. So that time, when the Adhik Masa, depending on when it comes, Ashwin, Kartik, Bhadrapad, wherever it is, the Tilak Panchanga is there, their Ganpati festival is before rest of the people. Or sometime their Diwali is a different time. So everyone else is like enjoyed the Diwali, or they are going to enjoy the Diwali in November. And these Tilak Panchang guys are playing with the firecrackers, and he says, what are they doing? And just as humorously, I'm saying it.
To be different.
These problems are known now also, but before it was a Druk Pratyay. In fact, that also led to some other confusion, not only the confusion of whether 13 years were completed. When Bhishma was ready to die, Bhishma Nirvana. Actually, if you see from simulations and everything, the month was month of a Falgun. But do you know what Bhishma is saying when he's ready to, that last day? He says, Magoyam samanu prapto, masa punyo yudhishthira, tribhaga shesha, etc., etc. Magoyam samanu prapto, masa punyo yudhishthira. He's saying, it appears to me that this is the month of a Magha. Actually, it was a month of Falgun. That kind of confusion happened because it was based on a Druk Pratyay. And when you want to Druk Pratyay, meaning the Chandra's phase and a position, but that is okay for a daily basis. But if it is to do with counting the years, the confusion can happen.
Thanks.
All right, we are right on the dot. So now up to you. I don't have a problem staying, but you guys are done. Like, you know, what is the time? You guys go 6 o'clock, right? Until whatever the time you go.
Oh, we have time for one more question if anyone wants to. If not, we can wrap it up. So we can go as late as 10 after 6.
Okay. I think
Shrikumar.
Vinekarji has a, you have to unmute yourself, you know, someone.
I think I'm asking a question that is there listed in the number of questions that you received. A few reconciliations with our current understanding of the past.
Yeah.
We go looking for the written script. Now they are doing research, Kalyan research,
Kalyan
Saraswati
Raman, Srinivas Kalyan Raman. Yeah.
is researching the and deciphering lipi of Harappa lipi, and it doesn't go very much far behind before maybe 3000, 6000 BC.
Right.
And clearly, Mahabharata says that there was lipi, and whether it is mythological presentation, metaphoric presentation or not, the scribe was Ganesha, and Vyasa is dictating, and the transcription is taking place instantaneously, and all that story. So obviously there is an understanding that there is a way of writing clearly and precisely what is being dictated. When if we go back to 5000 BC, and I'm not saying this to challenge you or anything like
No,
that.
please go ahead. Yeah, but get to the question. I know where you are going. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one part of it. And Dilip brought up another issue last time when we were discussing. That is a silly question that Witzel,
Yeah.
the professor at Harvard,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. You know, you didn't have any horses, and you can't find any horse remains in India, so you didn't have any horses there.
Yeah.
So you didn't have horses, then you didn't have any past civilization.
Yeah.
Aryans came and they brought the horses and all
Yeah.
this type of argument.
Yeah.
So this issue is that in Mahabharata there are references to chariots and horses all over the place.
Right.
And if the horses were not there in India, maybe they were there in the mid Asia or Eastern Asia, wherever the horses were.
Yeah.
And Mahabharata was there where the horses were there.
Yeah.
Or the horses were there where Mahabharata took place in India. So
right. No, so what is your question? So there is no archaeological evidence for horses. There is no language written, and so how the Mahabharata, right?
Pardon?
So what is your question, or is it a comment?
The question is, how do we reconcile these kinds of current arguments about
No, great question. I mean, again, this is a very frequently asked question.
And all that. How do we reconcile with the chronology? Yeah.
Right. And we reconcile it. And, you know, I don't know if anyone is following my writings or, you know, general social media. Every time, you know, and people think, oh boy, this guy always talks about those two words. But I talk those two words for a reason. I said, if you want to understand this, I mean, not just what I do, but in general, anything, what we need is a scientific acumen. We need logical reasoning and a vyapti jnana. Okay, scientific acumen, which is like a scientific way of studying it. Logical reasoning is logically connecting the premise to the conclusion, whatnot. And vyapti jnana, meaning evidence, you can say, you know, just evidence. Now let's go to what Witzel is claiming or people in general are claiming. Quickly, the language. We have a so you said correctly, Vinekarji, that as far as the IVC goes, it's not before that. It may not go before 5,000 years or 3,000, whatever, doesn't matter. When it doesn't go, what does that mean? We have not found anything that can be dated beyond that. That's all it means. Okay, the paper document. So Rigveda, I mean, Rigveda has a references Nadi Tame, Ambitame, Devi Tame, Saraswati. And Giribhya Samudra, the Saraswati, Grand Saraswati that starts in high mountains goes all the way to the ocean. Khonde papers 2014, 2016, 2017, 3 different papers show us that such a grand river did exist, but it did not flow to the ocean in the last 10,000 plus years. which means now we have to use logic to say that means it flew before that. Okay, now if you take the latest, the oldest copy of Rigveda, it may be from 1400 CE, like 600-year-old. Okay, but the Western researchers and their Indian lackeys, so Witzel, Pollock, all these folks, and the Indian all universities are filled with that humanities nonsense. What they look at the document and a dating of that document. Okay, and they say that's what it is. Do you know what Shraddha Pollock says? Ramayana in 200 BC and Mahabharata in some 200 BC, 150 BC. We have a clip. Raju Malhotra put that one clip, 30-second clip, and there he says, and I say that it's 150 BC. Now, why do I say that? Because I can. That's the kind of stupidity and arrogance these people have. Okay, and Witzel is not any different. If when I try to engage these people, they don't come. I mean, Raju Malhotra tries to engage them, they don't come. When I try to engage them, they don't come. Okay, so now quickly talk about the language. Now in Mahabharata, we have a descriptions that the arrows of the warriors actually had the names of the warriors written on it. I mean, must be true for all, but we have the specific references to Bhima, Drona, Ashwatthama, and Arjuna, and so on. The names were written. In Ramayana, you know that the whatever the signature, we don't know what exactly it was, but the Rama's ring had it, right? Insignia, supposedly. Now that could be, some people may say, sign. So that's a language thing. Horses. Now, therefore, I said scientific acumen, logical reasoning, Vyaptijnan. Now, if somebody is sleeping, we can wake him up. If somebody is pretending to be asleep, what can we do? That is Mr. Witzel. Okay, he deliberately wants to put something in a very wrong fashion. Okay, the kind of, I mean, he's a linguist, right? The linguistic nonsense that he has done is, I mean, my friend Dr. Shiva Shastri from Bangalore is writing a book on it, the whole linguistic nonsense. Do you know how the words change? They say they can do anything they want. They have this thing on the Harvard site, you can go and see this. For example, suppose they want to show a word like I'm just picking it up, it's not really true. Say Bhishma, how the word became Bhishma to Nirvana. Now this is, I'm just taking as a hypothetical joke. From Bhishma to Nirvana, right? Do you know how they say? This is how the language evolution took place. And they have these verbal videos there just for an individual letter. They'll go Baba Baba Bhishma Nirvana. That is how over a period of time this nonsense took place. Please go and check this. Okay, this from at the linguistics. So that is the level. Now come to the horses.
Required here.
No, again, you are asking as a devil's advocate. I know that, Vinay.
I'm not taking up for him at all.
No, I know. I know that.
Actually, I wrote a open letter to the president of Harvard criticizing Weitzel as a fraud, scholastic fraud.
Correct. But we need many people to do this. We need every Indian to rise up, and to do this. Quickly, I know we need to stop at 10. So the last one, the horses. We have different evidence, but one evidence is the origin of horses, the horse-like creature in the whole world. It also comes from India. How many people know that? Horse-like creature. It may not be even a horse. Like we are talking proto-horse, let's say. That's evidence from India. The second one, this Sharma, I forgot the name, but I have the paper. The evidence for horses. I may not have a paper right now. Actually, I lost my hard drive and that paper is gone, but it will exist in a Google, wherever. The evidence of horses in India, at least going to 18,000 BC. Now, this is not very young paper. This is like 30, 40-year-old paper. Witzel refuses to see it. Then the Rigveda horse is the one with the 34 ribs, not the steppe horse with the 36 ribs. Okay, we have a Marwadi horse, we have a Shivalik horse, we have all kinds of horses, nothing to do with the steppe horses. And the steppe horses were not domesticated for a long time. Okay, so you said, how can we resolve this thing? Again, you're asking as a devil's advocate. The point is, we have to go back to Vyaptijnan. I mean, if the premise is wrong, that they're saying, hey, there is no evidence of horses, so how come Mahabharata? We have to say, well, your information that there is no evidence itself is wrong. Okay, so that is the issue. And this cannot be done by just few researchers. I mean, when I say even few, that 100, no, that will not do. Because what happens is, I mean, I see this, I'm doing this for, especially since 2016, I'm doing it. And I find I'm tired of Arundhati Vasishtha, by the way, and I'm tired of Bhishma Nirvana. In fact, I don't want to talk about it. I want people to just understand it instantaneously. It's a simple stuff, but almost like if I'm pulled back to the same position, So please explain what is that Arundhati, or like, you said, okay, there's double star, triple star. I mean, that's where, I mean, if I want to become a popular and if money, then that's a great thing, teach the same thing. But actually there's so much more there. But the Swadhyaya Pravachanacha that we as a civilization we need to do, both young and old and everyone in between, that needs to happen. There is so much evidence. We have so much evidence, and people, outsiders, tells us we don't have any historical evidence. The West for most part has zilch evidence when it comes to history, and they're writing these big tomes about their own history. Like people ask about Mahabharata. Do you know that if you Alexander the Great or Jesus, for example, there is a zilch archaeological evidence. Zilch, zero archaeological evidence for either Jesus or Alexander the Great. So we trust the records of Megasthenes and Strabo and whoever it is, right? But when we see Mahabharata, we say, where is the evidence? Where is Krishna's arrow? Where is Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra? Anyways, I went over time, Meghana ji. So back to you. 7:20.
I just have a quick statement. No questions anymore. Thank you very much for a very enlightening 2 hours. And I know Meghna Bhabhi is going to close the session today, but I did want to get a statement in because I didn't have any questions up front. It's very, very enlightening, and I think it challenges people to actually go and read what is given in our scriptures, and I applaud you for that and your amazing power to bring all these verses immediately to your tongue. I think Saraswati vanished from there and is now sitting on your tongue. So we appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. That was very nice and very appropriate comment. आणि निलेश, मला पण तुमच्याबद्दल असं कौतुक आहे की गीता वाचतो आहोत आणि ऋतुनाम, मार्गशीर्षाणाम वगैरे आम्ही कित्येक वेळा वाचलं, पण तुम्ही जे आज सांगितलं त्या दृष्टीने आम्ही कधीच त्या श्लोकाकडे बघितलं नाही. आणि तुम्हाला तरी दृष्टी आहे आणि तुम्ही ती तशीच ठेवावी आणि पुढे पुढे जे काय तुम्हाला संशोधन करता येईल ते सगळ्यांपर्यंत तुम्ही पोहोचवावं, बिकॉज दीज आर ट्रू pearls of wisdom that our ancestors have documented, and people like you have the insight and the foresight and the willpower and the effort to bring it out to the public, and I wish you continued success with that. And I have one last request that please, we would like for you to come again and talk to us.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially Vinekarji, who somehow brought me to your notice, I presume. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sri Kumar आणि Shamala दोघेही, they are stalwarts of our community here. They are strong pillars, strong community pillars, and they are आमचे ते गुरुजन आहेत. So anything that comes from them, we take it in high esteem.
Right. And quickly a note to Vinekarji. Today I communicated with Professor Tilak, and so I said I'm going to do this session with Seva Nivrutta folks, and then he said, please convey his namaskar to you, Vinekarji. So
Namaskar.
Thank you very much. Please. Yeah.
Thank
Please read my books.
Thank you again. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
please,
you.
even if you don't read, please watch the videos, okay? The videos watching, and there are 200 plus videos of mine on a YouTube. So Nilesh Oak, and one more thing quickly, at your age, especially ladies, I know, I mean, my expertise is also into hormones and all that too, by the way. I study Ayurveda and all that. They have a tough sleeping problems, right? Most of the ladies will admit to that, and men too sometime. Please purchase my books. At the bedtime, start reading them. You'll get a wonderful good night's sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh ji. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
We would like to invite you again when the time permits. So
Okay,
thank
very
you
good.
again.
Thank you.
One last question. Have you done similar astronomical research on Arctic home in Vedas?
I have studied Arctic home in the Vedas to show that what Lokmanya Tilak has done is brilliant for his time, something very amazing. But that is not, I mean, the conclusions are not correct. I mean, we have already gone way beyond his timing. But just quickly, because you asked, any person, I get like 50 people asking, hey, I want to do something similar to you. Where should I start? Okay, and many times the question is extremely novice, but because they think it's like buying oh, you have a Apple 11. I mean, mine is what is the other company, Samsung, whatever. But Apple 11, I also want to buy it. They literally think like that. So you go there, buy, plug in and plug and play. It's not plug and play. But quickly, to answer that question, that particular thing has gone beyond Lokmanya Tilak. But what he did is a fabulous. So anyone coming to me saying he wants to do archaeoastronomy or some research, I said, go read Orion, go read Arctic home in the Vedas. First, write an essay showing why Tilak is correct in Orion, why Tilak is correct in Arctic home in the Vedas. Then write the second 2 essays showing why Tilak is wrong. When that is done, come talk to me. And I would say at least 100 people would have done this, asked me that question in last 10 years, and nobody has come back to me. Okay, after that, people are not willing to do the tapasya. That is the challenge. Thank you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.